up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. You know, a question that I see asked very often in my comment section is, JT, why are you always yelling? Does your microphone work? My microphone works perfectly fine. Thank you very much for asking. And I'm not yelling. It sounds like I'm yelling when really I'm just super enthusiastic and passionate about doing this, because there's nothing that I love more than talking about football. And sometimes I get a little bit overly excited while doing this, and it can come out as me yelling at you, which I apologize for. But if I'm ever too loud, you can always just lower the volume a little bit. And look, I've never been more excited for the college football season to kick off than what I am right now, because I can't wait to see how Bill Belichick is going to fare as the new head coach of North Carolina football. And I came across Josh Pate's take on his thoughts on what Bill Belichick is going to do at Chapel Hill. And I'm a huge fan of Josh Pate. He's a huge inspiration to me. He's a huge reason why I'm trying to pursue this full time. I've been listening to his show since 2019 when he was doing it independently. And normally Josh Pate isn't critical of coaches, especially during the off season. Because what is there to be critical of? No games have been played. So when he gave his thoughts when asked about how he feels Bill Belichick is going to perform coaching in college football, he was more critical than what he normally is. And it's because that he doesn't see Bill Belichick winning to the degree at the college level as what he did in the NFL. And there's a bunch of national college football guys that feel the same way that Josh Pate does. Him coaching in college football kind of feels a little bit weird because you've always viewed Bill Belichick as an NFL guy. And his style is better suited for that level than what it is in the NFL. He's up there in age. He's 70-something years old. So there's questions if he's going to be able to resonate with younger players. Also, college football is a little bit of a different world compared to what the NFL is. There's way less structure. And there's only so much that you can learn in a short amount of time, as well Bill Belichick can, never coaching this sport, not actually having his feet really wet in the college world. But I feel like Josh Pate and a bunch of national college football guys in the media can't see the storm that Bill Belichick is creating at North Carolina. Because I feel Bill Belichick is not only going to win, but he's also going to take UNC to the CFP in his first season. He has an easy schedule. He plays 7 teams that had losing records last year, and he plays 5 teams in conference play that were in the bottom half of the ACC last year. And we know that Bill Belichick still can coach football at a really high level. The thing is that is his coaching style going to be able to get the most out of some of these younger athletes, which I believe that it will. These players know what they're getting themselves into. With Bill Belichick's age comes a reputation. It comes with prestige. And these players all grew up watching him dominate the NFL for decades with Tom Brady. And they know what Bill Belichick is all about. And they know that he has a hard, old-school coaching style. And players wouldn't willingly play for him or transfer to play for him if they didn't know what they were getting themselves into. And Josh Pate's biggest point when it comes to why Belichick can have a lot of success at North Carolina is mainly due to North Carolina doesn't really have a rich tradition of winning at the highest level. They've only had 2 double-digit winning seasons in the last couple of decades, that being in 2015 and 1997. But Indiana didn't have a single double-digit winning season until Curt Cignetti arrived last year. Indiana has consistently been irrelevant in college football. But Curt Cignetti gets there all of a sudden, and they have the best season that they've ever had, and they make it to the CFP. And although Curt Cignetti has had way more years coaching college ball than what Bill Belichick has, he has a better understanding of how this sport operates than what Bill does. Belichick is really good at bringing a team together and being able to get the most out of guys who, on paper, may not be as good as what you may see on the field. So when it comes to his ability to acquire talent, he doesn't need a roster comprised of a bunch of 5- and 4-star guys, because if you are an elite coach, you can't punch above your weight class. Like we saw Kalen DeBoer do at Washington. When he first got to Washington, he immediately started winning, and he took that team a year later to a national championship with a roster that didn't have a bunch of blue chip talent. The thing about college football is that with the transfer portal now, talent is more spaced out than it's ever been. So if you're a good coach and you have a very effective scheme, you can elevate guys to a level that you may not think they were capable of reaching according to recruiting rankings or where they were rated coming out of high school. Bill Belichick, what made him such a great coach outside of, him being an incredible defensive mind, is that he was an elite evaluator of talent. He found a bunch of guys that were overlooked in the later parts of the draft, and he turned them into Hall of Fame players, such as the GOAT that is Tom Brady. He found him in the 6th round, the biggest steal in NFL draft history. And he found a bunch of other late round studs, because Belichick doesn't always judge guys based off rankings. There are certain things that Belichick looks for per certain positions that he just has an eye for that makes him really good at talent evaluation. And North Carolina right now has the 18th best recruiting class in the nation at the moment. And North Carolina, their alumni and also their school has committed to doing whatever it takes to lure high-end talent, or for Bill Belichick to get the players that he needs to win. Not only did this school lower their academic standards to make it easier for guys to want to come play for Belichick, but they also increased their NIL budget to $20 million pretty much. So North Carolina is all in on Bill Belichick. And we know that money essentially runs college football. When you got $20 million to spend on NIL, it makes it a lot easier for Bill Belichick to recruit, to get big names out of the transfer portal. And he's not really the sole guy responsible for recruiting and utilizing the transfer portal. Really, that's Michael Lombardi, who is his general manager. And Michael Lombardi, unlike Bill Belichick, is a little bit more modern in his approach. And he's really smart as well. So Belichick doesn't necessarily fully have his hands into the talent acquisition pool as much as what Michael Lombardi does, but he is hitting the recruiting trail. He has shown up to a good amount of high schools. He is building good relationships with the high school coaches in the area. And the Carolinas, they're not a hotbed like Georgia, Florida, Texas, and California are for high-end talent in high school football, but you can find some really good players in the Carolina area. And Belichick's doing a really good job of getting some of the best local guys, and then he'll probably go to Florida, get some IMG guys, get some guys out of the South Florida area, just like Nick Saban did. And Bill Belichick, although he doesn't know college football that much, it's not going to take him that long to learn this game, because he's somebody that if he doesn't know a lot about something, he'll go and he'll ask somebody else that has a little bit more expertise in that area. And Nick Saban has given him plenty of advice over the last couple of months about what he needs to do. Nick Saban even said that Bill Belichick is suited to succeed with this new era of college football. Nick Saban, what doesn't get talked about is how he modeled his Alabama program from how Bill Belichick was running the New England Patriots. But he was able to kind of make it a hybrid version of an NFL program where you had a bunch of NFL things that Alabama did in terms of their operations, but he was able to blend that with college football. Same thing with Jedd Fisch at Washington. Bill Belichick has also spent a good amount of time up there with Jedd Fisch, who is a hybrid NFL college football guy, and he runs his program the same way. So Bill Belichick has been around enough people to kind of get at least somewhat of a okay feel for what's required to win at this level. But I feel what Josh Pate and a bunch of other national media guys are missing when it comes to Bill Belichick is that although college football is a different realm for him, it's still football. Coaching these players on the field still isn't all that different from when he was coaching up players in the NFL. If guys want to win and guys want to increase their chances of making it to the next level, there's no better guy to receive all of those things from than the greatest head coach in NFL history. The guy has won numerous Super Bowls with Tom Brady, and without Tom Brady, he's won championships. And this is just one of the best guys to talk to when it comes to just having a better understanding of the game, being prepared in certain situations. Bill Belichick, what made him so great in New England is that he was always ready for anything that you threw at him. And I promise you that with Bill Belichick coaching North Carolina, you're not going to see them giving up 70 points to a school like James Madison. You don't need to have elite talent to win in the ACC unless you're going up against a school like Clemson, maybe Miami on a good year. But even then, North Carolina has relatively had Miami's number the last couple of times they played. And North Carolina doesn't have to play either one of those schools. They have one of the easiest schedules in the ACC this year, which is why if Bill Belichick is still as good as a coach as what he was in the NFL, he should easily be able to get to 10, 11 wins, make it to the ACC championship game, and who knows what could happen at that point. But there's a strong chance that he could get into the playoffs as a 2-loss team. We saw SMU get in last year. We saw Clemson get in with 4 losses. So it's not as if the committee is going to completely blackball Bill Belichick if North Carolina does indeed have a really successful first season under him. But I also think that the committee kind of would have a little bit of bias towards North Carolina if they are as good as what I expect them to be, because it's good for ratings. And let's not act like ESPN doesn't somewhat have an agenda. But this roster is good enough to dominate this easy schedule that they have. The toughest team that they play is Clemson. Outside of that, every game is winnable. So the floor for North Carolina is 7 wins. The ceiling is possibly they go 11-1 with that lone loss coming against Clemson. I feel there's a storm that Bill Belichick has brewing down there at Chapel Bill that Josh Pate kind of can't see along with a bunch of other guys, because you normally don't see a guy that's had the coaching career with the level of success that Bill Belichick has had take this and take that to college football. But I feel he'll probably be the best NFL, the college football coach that we've ever seen, just because of how good he has been at being able to get the most out of teams that weren't perceived to be that talented, how he just always has his team ready for any situation that gets thrown at them, and he just knows how to punch above his weight classes. The Patriots didn't always win championships with their best teams, and they lost with some of their better teams. Honestly, I never thought a Patriots team with Randy Moss, Wes Welker, and Tom Brady in their primes will lose to the lowly New York Giants. Not once, but twice. So I'm pretty confident that Bill Belichick, unlike what Josh Pate and a bunch of national guys believe, is going to win, and he's going to do it at a really high level than what's expected. Alabama recruiting is on a heater right now. They currently have the 5th best class in the nation. And Kalen DeBoer is once again proving the naysayers wrong. Remember when he first took this Alabama job, it was, oh, a guy from the West Coast isn't going to be able to recruit the South. And yet, Kalen DeBoer is recruiting so well that people seem to have forgotten that Nick Saban has retired, because I keep seeing this posted pretty commonly on social media that Nick Saban is still recruiting for Alabama. Nick Saban is recruiting for Kalen DeBoer. No, Nick Saban isn't doing anything for Alabama anymore. He may be giving Kalen DeBoer a little bit of advice here and there, but this is all Kalen DeBoer and general manager Courtney Morgan. The amount of dominance that they're having on the recruiting trail right now. They have a bunch of 5-stars that they've gotten over the last week, and I want to go over a few of them just to give a quick Alabama recruiting update. Recently, they landed wide receiver Cedarian Morgan, who is a big body guy. He has unreal athleticism for somebody that's 6'4", 210 pounds, and it looks like he has a big enough frame to where he could add 20 more pounds of muscle to where we could see him peak at 230. He has a large catch radius. He does a really good job of using his size to get good positioning to win those 50-50 ball situations. And not only is he a 5-star, but he's the second best receiver in the 26 recruiting class, and he's the best player out of the state of Alabama. And I know that Auburn has to be really hurt that they missed out on Cedarian Morgan, because, you know, I see Auburn fans saying that we don't really care about national recruiting that much. We just want to lock down the local guys. Well, you missed out on Cedarian Moore, so you struck out with him. Then you get safety Jere Edwards, who, in some people's opinions, may be the best player in this Alabama recruiting class. 5-star, he's a top 30 player in this class, and he has the ability to come on campus right away next year and be an instant impact starter for Alabama. He's not Caleb Downs, but he's not too far off. He already has NFL size, and yet, you know, he's 6'2", 210. He could get a lot bigger than that. He has a lot of athleticism. That seems to be the case with a bunch of these 5-star guys. Of course, they got to be good athletes. They wouldn't just give you 5 stars if you weren't. But he can do a variety of different things. He can play in the slot. You can utilize him near the line of scrimmage as like a nickel or dime linebacker. He can cover against running backs, tight ends, and he can also guard up on smaller slot receivers as well. With his physicality, if this guy gets his hands on you, if you don't have the ability to have a little bit of finesse in your game, he's going to absolutely destroy you. And also, he can play up top as well, single high, 2 high safety looks if you want to use them in that capacity. So when you got a chess piece like Jere Edwards, it's kind of impossible for you not to get the most out of him. And with his skill set, it'll just be hard not to put him on the field when he ends up touching campus next year. And I know that it's a little bit of time until that happens, but with his size and what I've seen him have on a few of the highlight clips that I've seen of him, this has the potential to be a all-conference or all-American level player for the Tide. And this was one of their biggest pickups without a doubt. And he shut down his recruiting pretty early. After he took his official visit to Alabama, he pretty much canceled his officials elsewhere. So it was pretty much a guarantee that he was going to Alabama. Then they got defensive lineman Nolan Wilson, who is the 99th ranked player in this recruiting class out of Mississippi. Quick first step. He's more so of a 2-year developmental guy because he's 6'4", 250. So Alabama probably will want to bring him in for a year or two and put some more weight on him. And I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing him become an interior defensive lineman, because I do think that he has enough frame to where you could bulk him up to around 285, 290, and you play him at defensive tackle, and he could be a lot more effective at defensive tackle than what he is on the edge, because with how quick of a get-off he has and how disruptive he is against the pass, I think he would just be better suited as a defensive tackle, because normally when you have defensive tackles that have this kind of athleticism, they're really hard to stop. But they want to play him as a edge rusher or a D end, and I don't think that would be a bad decision either. And then I think that the crown jewel, who personally I think is the best player in this Alabama recruiting class right now, is Xavier Griffin, edge rusher out of Georgia. I think he's a better player than what Jahray Edwards is because he has the ability to do everything. And I'm not saying that to be hyperbolic. I mean that. If you watch his highlights, not only is he playing linebacker, but he's also getting after the quarterback. He's covering against the pass. He can also stop the run as well. This is your typical sideline-to-sideline linebacker with a lot more added versatility. And a few months ago, he was committed to USC. USC fans were very excited about him. And when he decommitted, they were a little bit heartbroken because he would have been a game changer for Lincoln Riley and Deanne Lynn up there. And I was shocked to see that instead of him going to Georgia, he went to Alabama. So Kalen DeBoer essentially can go to California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia and take some of the best recruits out of some of the bigger name programs' backyards. And that's a testament to how good of a recruiter he is. And when you look at Xavier Griffin, he's 6'3", 200 pounds. He kind of looks a little bit like Jahad Campbell. That's the comp that 247 gave him. And it's a little bit understandable, even though I wouldn't really say he's Jahad Campbell because Jahad Campbell is built like Hercules. But he probably won't start until around 2027 because you're not going to start in the SEC at this size. You definitely probably got to get the at least 225. So they'll bulk him up. And when he eventually does go on the field, he's going to be a monster along with Jahray Edwards. Having both Jahray Edwards and Xavier Griffin in the same class is just absolutely nasty. And it's a further indicator of how great of a recruiter that Kalen DeBoer is. And of course, Courtney Morgan is kind of doing a little bit of the heavy lifting, but the players got to fall in love with the head coach more so than them falling in love with the general manager because the head coach is going to be spending more time with these guys than what the GM is going to do. So I think that Kalen DeBoer is a huge reason for why Alabama's having the amount of success that they currently are having in recruiting. I don't think it's all because of Courtney Morgan, and I definitely don't think it's because Nick Saban is still recruiting for Alabama. But this is why I was telling people that Kalen DeBoer is the second coming of Nick Saban. Now, I got met with a lot of criticism when I said that, but there's a lot of similarities that Kalen DeBoer and Nick Saban have. And Kalen DeBoer, he's won everywhere that he's been. And you just don't have the amount of success that Kalen DeBoer has been at so many places without you being able to have a good eye for talent and also being able to get guys to buy into you. So it's no surprise that Alabama's recruiting continues to roll post Nick Saban. So this is just a little brief Alabama recruiting update. Give your thoughts in the comment section below if you're watching on YouTube on how you feel this Alabama recruiting class is going to turn out and what are some more commits that we could expect the Tide to land over these next couple of months. Florida had a remarkable in-season turnaround last year. After they got blown out and humiliated in the swamp by Texas A&M, I thought it was all but over for Billy Napier. I thought that his fate was sealed. I thought that it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when he was going to get fired. And instead of losing his job, all he did was have a sporadic in-season turnaround when all of a sudden the defense improved. The offense looked really good after the Graham Mertz injury, and DJ Lagway came in and led them to an 8-5 finish. And with how great Florida played down the stretch, having back-to-back upset wins against Ole Miss and LSU, is a huge reason why I'm buying a lot of stock into the Florida Gators this year under Billy Napier. But despite the optimism that I share with a good amount of folks, the Billy Napier doubters are still there, and they're louder than ever. And if you don't believe that Florida is going to have a good season, it's mainly because you don't believe in Billy Napier, aka Sunbelt Billy. Either you just believe that he's not a good coach, he's in over his head, the SEC is too much for him, or you're just not a fan of his play calling. And I do think that there are some valid criticisms of Billy Napier. You know, the play calling could be a lot better. The end-game decision-making isn't always the best at times, especially in the fourth quarter. But you got to give Billy Napier credit when it's due for the turnaround that he was able to engineer with Florida last year. Because when they had those blowout losses at home to Miami and Texas A&M, the season could have easily spiraled for him. And for him to right the ship as early as what he did, it's a sign that he does have the ability to be a good coach. He may not be a coach that can lead you to a national championship, but he at least can be serviceable enough to where you're not going to bottom out under him. And that's what we saw out of Florida last year. And I feel what Billy Napier deserves a lot of credit for that the naysayers are hesitant to give him is that he was winning last season in spite of the amount of injuries that they had to deal with. They started a good amount of underclassmen last year, and they all performed pretty well. And that was a big reason why Florida gave him another year to prove himself, because at least 60 to 70% of Florida's NIL money is tied into the underclassmen that were responsible for Florida's turnaround last year. We know about DJ Lackway, who was a true freshman All-American, and how fantastic he looked, but true freshman running back Jaden Ball was also really good. And fun fact, when DJ Lackway and Jaden Ball started for Florida last season, they were 3-0. And not only were those guys balling out as true freshmen, but you had a few freshmen who were balling out on defense as well. And Billy Napier has done a really good job of not just recruiting, but developing talent and also making really good transfer portal additions as well. And when Florida used the transfer portal last year, they had a top 5 portal class, and they struck gold on a lot of guys. Elijah Badger, Chimray DK were Florida's 2 best receivers last year. George Gums Jr. was 3rd on the team in sacks last season. And then the year before that, 2023, you landed Caleb Banks, who to me is the best defensive tackle in the nation at the moment. So Billy Napier has a really good eye for spotting talent, and a lot of the guys that he has recruited are going to be impact players for the Gators this year. We know about Lagway and Jaden Ball, but Eugene Wilson, he's a name that kind of has been forgotten about because he missed the majority of last season due to injuries. Jordan Castell, he had a really good freshman season not too long ago. He was a SEC freshman. Well, he made it on the SEC all-freshman team his first year starting. So you got a bunch of guys that, with added years of experience, should be really good for the Gators this year, along with the transfer portal finds that Billy Napier has been able to get. I think that Florida is destined for a 9-win season, and possibly they could win 10 games if they're able to beat either Texas or upset Georgia, which I think that they can at least win one of those games. You get Texas at home, Georgia's a rivalry game. I feel with the team that Florida has coming into this year, the gap between them and Georgia isn't as wide as what it's been in years past. And with the healthy DJ Lackway, I feel he could kind of turn things in Florida's favor. But the Billy Napier naysayers, they're never going to shut up until Billy Napier is just able to just shut the door closed on them, and he's really able to put together a really good season. 8 wins is okay, but that's not what the standard is at Florida, which is understandable. I understand if you have higher expectations for what Florida should be, and you're right to have those. But progress isn't always linear. Dan Mullen didn't do a great job of recruiting. He brought in some good classes, but unlike Billy Napier's recruiting classes, a lot of the guys Dan Mullen brought in didn't really see the field, and they didn't stick with the program like how Billy Napier's recruiting classes have with the guys that he has been able to get. And I don't think that Dan Mullen was that good in the transfer portal neither. So there are a lot of things that Billy Napier has done a better job at doing as far as building up Florida's roster compared to what Dan Mullen is. And as far as the play calling goes, look, DJ Lackway was a true freshman All-American. So if Billy Napier's play calling was good enough for him to be that good, then I don't really see it being an issue. And when you have a guy as talented as what DJ Lackway is, he can make an average play caller look a lot better than what they actually are, because he can turn a bad play into a good play and a good play into a great play. That's what happens when you land the kind of generational talent that DJ Lackway is. So I have a lot of confidence that Billy Napier is going to have a really big fourth season down there in Gainesville. Like I said, I think Florida goes 9-3 with the ceiling of being 10-2, and maybe they make an appearance in the SEC championship game or make it into the college football playoffs. Matt Rhule is entering his third season at Nebraska, which makes this team incredibly dangerous this season. Matt Rhule, everywhere he goes, in his third season, that's when he has the most success. He always delivers in year 3. Number 3 seems to be his lucky number for a reason, because when he was in his third season at Temple, he went 10-4. His third season at Baylor, he finished 11-3 and won the Big 12 championship. Year 3 is when Matt Rhule gets all his ingredients. He gets in the kitchen, and that's when he starts cooking up that Matt Rhule year 3 magic. And the Matt Rhule year 3 magic is what makes Nebraska one of the biggest sleeper teams in the Big Ten that could make a push for the college football playoffs this year. And last season, Nebraska lost 5 out of 6 of their games by 1 possession, which is a sign that this program is trending in this direction for having a huge breakout season. I know that a bunch of you Nebraska fans are tired of being the 1 possession champions, because this was the same case under Scott Frost, but this is a lot different, because everywhere Matt Rhule goes, he always wins in his third season. And you had a very hard-fought game against Ohio State on the road where you lost 21-17. You were in control for that game for the majority of it up until the final minutes of the fourth quarter. You had a overtime loss to Illinois where Dylan Raiola kind of showed signs of being an inexperienced quarterback, and that kind of haunted you in that loss. But with the favorable schedule that Nebraska has this year, you avoid playing Ohio State and Oregon. Your toughest game is against Penn State. There's a realistic path to Nebraska winning 10 games and making a surprise appearance in the Big Ten championship game, because they got a really solid team. They used the transfer portal pretty well. They got the 13th best they got the 13th best portal class entering this season. The recruiting has been pretty good, although it could be a lot better. But Matt Rhule isn't all about getting the blue chip talent all the time. Sometimes he's just all about getting guys that can be developed and fit the culture that he wants Nebraska to have. But a large reason why Nebraska can make a really big leap this year is Dylan Raiola. Dylan Raiola, Patrick Mahomes from TMU. He was really impressive at times during his true freshman campaign. He started last year off really hot. But then as the season wore on, that's when he started to kind of regress. But he ended the season on a pretty high note with a bowl game, and Nebraska snapped their streak without a bowl win. So I feel with Dylan Raiola entering his second season, he could have the kind of second year that we all are expecting DJ Lackway to have at Florida, because Dylan Raiola, like DJ Lackway, he was a highly sought-after recruit. Initially, he was going to play for Georgia until Nebraska flipped him at the last minute. So there is a lot of upside with this dude. And if he is just 60% of what Patrick Mahomes is, Nebraska could have the best quarterback in the Big Ten this year. And although I don't really think that he is entirely like Patrick Mahomes, he does have a lot of similar mannerisms to what Mahomes have. or has in terms of his playing style, his ability to make a bunch of wild throws outside the pocket, his ability to improvise. He's a willing runner. He's not a guy that's going to burn you on the ground like a Jalen Milroe or Lamar, but if you give him enough green grass, he can make you pay. Nebraska has a really good offensive line coming into this year. They also added Dane Key and Isaiah Hunter out of the transfer portal at receiver. Dane Key is going to be one of the best receivers in the Big Ten this year. This was one of the most underrated transfer portal additions that anybody made during this offseason because Dane Key was incredibly underutilized when he was at Kentucky because of the bad play calling and the lackluster quarterback play that he received there. So if Dylan Raiola takes that next leap, look out for Dane Key. He could easily emerge as one of the top receivers in the Big Ten. He's an elite deep threat. He has track speed. There's a lot of good pieces around Dylan Raiola that can help him take that big leap. And if that happens, that's going to help Nebraska be possibly not just a team that can compete for the Big Ten championship, but probably compete for a playoff spot as well. We saw Indiana take advantage of having an easy schedule last year. They ducked Ohio State until the tail end of the season. And Nebraska could kind of have a similar season to what we saw Curt Cignetti have last year due to how favorable this schedule is and everything that Nebraska has on offense coming in. The defense is kind of the biggest concern because they did lose their defensive coordinator to Florida State, and he was one of the better defensive coordinators in college football. But you have an experienced secondary. You return 4 starters at that position. Your defensive line could have a small drop-off because you lost a few defensive linemen to the draft and a few that followed the defensive coordinator that they lost to FSU. But you do a pretty good job replacing that via the transfer portal and recruiting. You still have tons of young players with a bunch of upside there. So Nebraska, with this Matt Rhule year 3 magic, they're a team that nobody should really be sleeping on. And don't be shocked if you see them win 9 to 10 games this year. That's where I see them being at. I think the floor is 8 wins. If everything goes wrong, I think that's probably where they'll be at. But if everything just goes right for Nebraska, then maybe their lone loss of the season comes against Penn State. Because there's not a single team on their schedule outside of Penn State that I don't really think Nebraska has a chance of being able to lose to, because they do have a pretty good team. Matt Rhule has a respectable track record of being able to win in year 3. So I'm banking on that Matt Rhule year 3 magic, making Nebraska an incredibly dangerous team in the Big Ten this year. USC got ran flat over by the Big Ten last year. Let's just be honest about it. They got a rude awakening their first year in this conference. They were too finesse. They didn't want to run the football. They wanted to try to win games with an air raid mentality, which doesn't work in the conference that's rooted in physicality and hard-nosed football. And they also didn't have enough talent and depth on the line of scrimmage. And I feel this year, USC is about to be throwing a lot of humble pie at the Big Ten because they are better equipped to handle the physicality of Big Ten football. They should be way more balanced on offense. You should see them have a better blend of the run and pass because they ran the ball only 39% of the time last year, which was 129th in college football. And when you look at the teams that were in the top 4 of this conference, Indiana, Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, they all were able to play complementary football because they could throw the football if necessary, but they also could run it really well. USC should be able to do that this year. They added 2 really good transfer portal running backs. You got Ramon Jordan, who you got from the JUCO ranks. He was the JUCO Offensive Player of the Year last season. He scored 20 touchdowns. He was averaging over 7 yards per attempt, and he had 1,600 rushing yards. And he's going to be a monster in Lincoln Riley's offense because he's going to be that power back that USC needs to be able to play complementary football in the Big Ten this year. They also picked up Eli Sanders, who's going to be more of a change of pace back for them as well. And they always are pretty decent at running back. Lincoln Riley always does a really good job of finding good backs, but I feel Lamar Jordan is going to be the best running back of the bunch that they have in that room. And we know that USC can throw the football with the best of them. It's just that they have to be able to use the run to help take some of that stress off of the passing game, because you can't win the Big Ten with the air raid mentality that Lincoln Riley had last year. They threw the ball 60% of the time, which was the 5th most in college football, and that's just not a winning recipe for winning in this conference. This year, with Jaden Mayava being in his second season and this Lincoln Riley offense, I expect him to take a major jump. And I feel he's one of the better breakout quarterbacks that isn't really being talked about a bunch. And the reason why I'm confident that Jaden Mayava is going to break out for USC this year is because he's playing for the quarterback whisperer. There is no QBU in college football. QBU is Lincoln Riley. Every quarterback that he gets automatically turns into gold. And I felt that Miller Moss last year wasn't really all that bad. So if he felt that Jaden Mayava could give the offense a lot more production at that position than what Miller Moss was giving them, then I feel the potential is throughout the roof when it comes to him. He has a really strong arm, and he's a really good athlete, so he also is going to contribute to the run game being a lot better than what it was. Lincoln Riley normally is accustomed to having a quarterback that also is able to make things happen with his legs, and that's what you get out of Jaden Mayava. And it also helps that he's going to be throwing to the second best receiving duo in the Big Ten this year in Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane. So with USC being able to play more complimentary football, it should help them have way more success offensively this year than what we saw them have in 2024. And it's not as if Lincoln Riley has to completely shift from who he is. We know that he likes to throw the football. This is a Mike Leach guy. Let's not forget that he got his roots under Mike Leach somewhat. So, of course, he's always going to be a pass-first guy, but you got to be a lot better at staying committed to the ground game. So you got to have a better pass-to-run ratio. So if USC is about 55% pass and 45% run, that should help do them justice this year as opposed to being 70% throwing the football all over the yard, and then we're only going to run the ball 30% of the time. In this conference, you got to have a good rushing attack. You got to be able to commit to it. And if USC can do that, they should set themselves up for much more success in the Big Ten offensively this year. And defensively, I feel this is going to be a top 30 or better defense. You got D'Anton Lynn in year 2, and he did God's work with this defense his first year calling plays. Yeah, they still were a little bit vulnerable against the pass. They had the 86th worst pass defense in FBS last year, allowing 235 yards through the air, but that should improve this year. They got some really good players in the transfer portal to improve that secondary, such as DJ Harvey from San Jose State. They got Bishop Fitzgerald, who was really productive at NC State last year. Kamari Ramsey returns at safety as well. And with them having a more beefed up defensive line, that's going to help this pass defense out, because one way to help out your secondary is by not having to allow them to be in pass coverage for all day long, because that's what USC did with their inability to generate a consistent pass rush. And even when they had to send extra guys, that still didn't really do the job. This year, you should have a breakout year out of Cameron Fountain, who was a blue chip guy that USC got from Georgia's backyard a few years ago. He should have a breakout season along with defensive tackle Devin Tompkins. They got a true freshman and Jakeem Stewart that I see being a really big factor as well on that D-line. He already has a college football ready physique, so he should be part of that rotation. And they got some really good linebackers this year. So I expect for USC's defense to take a giant leap this year. And for them to play at the level that they did last year and year one under D'Anton Lynn, it's fair to assume that this defense can take an even bigger jump with how good of a defensive coordinator he is. And D'Anton Lynn has a lot of NFL roots. His dad coached in the NFL. His dad is a running backs coach, and he's all about physicality, dominating the line of scrimmage. So D'Anton Lynn should have that same mentality coaching up USC's defense in the second season. And this probably will be the last year that we see this dude on the Trojan sidelines, because if his defense ends up taking the jump that it's expected to make, then he probably ends up getting a head coaching job somewhere else. So USC, with them having a more balanced offense this year, with more emphasis on running the football, playing a more complementary style of play, and with this defense having more talent and depth on the line of scrimmage, they are better suited to handle the physicality of the Big Ten. Because when you're playing this Big Ten schedule and week after week you're going up against guys that are just trying to ground and pound you to oblivion, you got to have the ability to match those teams' physicality, which USC is going to be able to do this year. Oklahoma could win the SEC this year, and it's not insane to believe this when you look at everything that the Sooners are bringing into this season. You got John Mateer, who has the potential to be a Heisman finalist. He scored more touchdowns by himself last year than what Oklahoma had as a team. And with Oklahoma going up against some of the better quarterbacks in the SEC this year, such as Arch Manning, Lenore Sellers, and Garrett Nussmeier, they're going to need John Mateer to play at a Heisman level, which I definitely believe that he's capable of. Not only is he a really efficient passer, but he also is a really good runner. He had 15 rushing touchdowns last season, and he had more total yards of offense than what Oklahoma had by themselves as a complete team. So that shows you how talented this guy truly is. And Washington State has been a gold mine for quarterbacks over the last couple of years. Cam Ward balled out at Miami. There also was another quarterback that they had that's playing good football at San Jose State. And with John Mateer following his offensive coordinator, Ben Arbuckle, from Pullman down to Norman, that's also going to make the adjustment and the level of competition that he's going to be playing a lot easier, because he's playing in the same system. And with him having Deion Burks and Jaden Gibson to throw the football to, that's also going to help him as well. Oklahoma has a really good wide receiver room. Deion Burks was an absolute stud at Purdue, and last year injuries held him back. I feel this year we finally are going to get to see a breakout season out of him. He's really good after the catch, has really good hands. Jaden Gibson, he's a potential breakout candidate at receiver for the Sooners as well. He's going to replace the role that Nick Anderson had as that big play deep threat that's going to take the top off the defense. Has similar size to what Nick Anderson had, 6'5", 197 pounds, and he was averaging 26 yards per catch last year with only 14 receptions, and yet he had 5 touchdowns and 375 receiving yards. So imagine what he can do getting more volume, having a better quarterback to throw him the football as well. I could see him going for well over 1,000 yards this year and being one of the better receivers in the SEC this season. Now, the biggest concern for Oklahoma's offense is their offensive line, because they got Jaden Ott out of the transfer portal. And it's one thing to have a talented running back, but it's another thing if you don't have a good offensive line to open up those running lanes for him. So Jaden Ott can only be as good as what this offensive line is going to allow him to be. And if this offensive line steps up and they play at least a serviceable level, that'll be good enough for Jaden Ott to take off this year, because he was dominating that Cal, and going to Oklahoma where he should have much better blocking for him, he also, like John Mateer, has potential to be a possible Heisman finalist. They have 2 Heisman caliber players in the backfield, but Jaden Ott's success is largely going to stem on if this offensive line can take a big step up. And I believe that it will, because they've been working on this offensive line for the past 2-3 seasons. So eventually, when you throw shit at the wall, eventually it sticks. And that's what has to happen with this offensive line for Oklahoma. But even if the offensive line still has its fair share of struggles, with John Mateer's mobility, he can make up for that, because you also can utilize him on design quarterback runs, and he also can scramble outside the pocket, extend plays, and pick up yards with his legs as well, which could open things up for Jaden Nod also, because the defense will focus so much on keying in on John Mateer that you leave holes open for Jaden Nod. So with the talent and horsepower Oklahoma's bringing in on offense, they're good enough to win the SEC, because we know that the defense is going to be up to par. One thing that we never have to question is a Brent Venables coach defense. And last year, their defense could have been a lot better than what it was if they didn't have the offense going 3-and-out turnover pretty much every single possession. So with the offense being way more efficient, Oklahoma could have a top 15, top 10-ish or better defense this year. And if you couple an elite defense with good offense, it's a recipe for winning the SEC, because they're going up against some of the more high-powered offenses in this conference this year. You got to play Texas, LSU, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Alabama. And Oklahoma's defense showed up when they went against those teams last year outside of Texas, because, that was just an absolute massacre. But against Tennessee, their defense played really well. Their defense pretty much carried them in that win against Alabama. So if they can get some more competent offense, which they definitely should, if not then some, then this defense possibly could be the best in all of college football. They got a really good defensive line. They're really good getting after the quarterback last year. And they got a really talented secondary. Like, their secondary is one of the most talented in the SEC this year, based off a bunch of those guys that they're going to have starting that they recruited. So Oklahoma winning the SEC this year is not a pipe dream. It can actually happen. They can beat Texas. It's a rivalry game. You can never just assume that one team's going to win a rivalry game just because they have the better roster, because rivalry games aren't necessarily always determined by who has the better team, as what we saw from Ohio State, Michigan last year. Ohio State was a 3-point or 3-touchdown favorite against Michigan last year, and Michigan beat them. And they beat them to a pulp. They pounded them to oblivion. So if the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry doesn't show you anything, it's a perfect indicator that this Oklahoma-Texas rivalry could go in Oklahoma's favor, just because of rivalry games having a different feel from the rest of the other games that you play in your schedule, because you see this team every year. They know you better than anybody else that you play. They know your tendencies. They know what you like to do. So that's why I feel Oklahoma has a good chance to upset Texas this year. And if they can beat Texas, then there's not a single other team that they don't have the ability to beat on their schedule this year, because Texas, to me, is the most complete team in college football. They don't really have too many weaknesses, if any at all. So if Oklahoma can beat them, they can beat Alabama. They can beat LSU. It doesn't matter if it's on the road, at home, in the parking lot, in the backyard, wherever. Just line it up, and Oklahoma can get right with you. And Oklahoma has recruited pretty well. They've brought in a few top 10 recruiting classes under Brent Venables. There was somebody in my last Oklahoma video trying to tell me that Oklahoma is starting to go a little bit broke. Man, that's BS, man. Everybody they've been snagging out of the transfer portal, you don't pay a guy like Jaden Nod and John Mateer and some of the other guys that they brought in out of the transfer portal if you was going broke. Like, stop the nonsense. Oklahoma can win the SEC this year if all of these things happen. If you get Heisman-level quarterback play from John Mateer, if you can get Deion Burks and Jaden Gibson going off, which definitely can happen with them having improved quarterback play, the offensive line finally takes a step up, and the defense is going to play at an elite level, and it can be a lot better than what it was last year due to them now having an offense that's not going to give them just a 30-second breather. Oklahoma is a lot better than what you think. This is a team that is good enough to win this conference. Do not overlook this team. They got the quarterback play. They got the offensive coordinator right. This is a team that I would not sleep on playing in Mercedes-Benz Stadium come the first week of December.